Okay, for this video, I wanted to talk about just one other geologic principle, which is the principle of uniformitarian. Oh, geez. Uniformitarianism. I am definitely copying this down from where it's written off to the side here because it is a big word. Uniformitarianism, thankfully, it has some nice roots. Uniform means everything is the same. The catchphrase that's often used to explain this is the present is the key to the past. The way I like to think of it is basically the rules don't change. So if it works this way in the present, then it probably worked that way in the past. We can think that this is true of, the laws of physics. E equals mc squared. That's true in the present. It's probably still true in the past. There's not really, unless we have good evidence to prove that it changed, it probably worked that way. So this really came to become a thing. We have James Hutton, who was one of the first people, father of geology, to write this idea out and he wrote a book called the Theory of the Earth. And he, like any good geologist, had seen a lot of rocks. That's how you become a good geologist, is you just see a lot of rocks. You gain a lot of experience. And the idea that he had was, if I see a block of sandstone, which if you sort of zoom in on it, you might see that it is literally, it's called sandstone for a reason. It is sand that has been sort of cemented together into a nice blocky rock. And he would say, okay, this is sandstone. It's made up of sand. Where do I see sand? There are other places, but one probably really common one is in beaches. But where he finds the sandstone is not actually anywhere near a beach. The idea of uniformitarianism is that in the present, if I usually find sand and sand that is sort of being cemented together, it sort of looks like it's becoming sandstone. If I see that in the present, then that probably is also how it worked in the past. So if I see the sandstone not near a beach now, I can probably infer that when it was created, it was likely in a beach environment. Even though it's not very beachy there now, it was in a beach environment. And we can take this even further, as if this is on the top of a mountain, it's nowhere near a beach. But this tells us that in order for it to go to the beaches, to the top of a mountain, we had a lot of steps along the way. So uniformitarianism it carried with it this idea that there is gradual changes over a lot of time. So the next guy who came along in this story is Charles Lyell, 1830. And maybe that date means something to you if you've read much about evolution or Darwin. So Charles Lyell wrote a book called The Principles of Geology. And this book was with Darwin when he was on his voyage of the Beagle. He got the new editions. When he would go to port, he would have people send him the newer editions of this book. And, Darwin was a naturalist. He studied, of course, we know him for evolution, but he also looked at a lot of things. He looked at rocks. And so Lyell himself, he really only applied his theory of uniformitarianism to abiotic things, to not living things. He very much believed that organisms were created as is and did not change. He did not think that there are gradual changes over a lot of time in animals. And maybe as I said this part again, maybe you said, hey, that does sound a lot like evolution. Evolution, the idea is there are a lot of changes and you know, sometimes there's events that happen that make these changes happen more rapidly, but on the whole of things, they're still kind of slow. And so we need a lot of time for all these changes to accumulate to, you know, the origin of a species. So this is why I find this particular geological principle so exciting, is it was originated when we were looking at rocks and we were saying if sandstone forms this way in the present, it probably formed that way in the past. And that tells me wherever I find a block of sandstone, that the environment in that place was one where one would have found sand. It applied very strictly to rocks. But Darwin had this book and he saw how it applied to rocks. And even though Lyell didn't say anything about evolution or that sort of thing, Darwin took the ideas and they influenced his view of evolution. Without this word here, gradual changes over a lot of time, you might have said, oh, that's describing natural selection. And not to say that this is the only thing that influenced Darwin's thinking. There, you know, he had a lot of things coming in to influence him. But I find that this sort of, you know, very broad, the present is the key to the past, maybe even a little simplistic, like, of course, if it happens today, it probably worked the same way back then. This sort of broad and simple principle carried with it some really big implications that didn't just change the way geology was done, but in the end, it actually changed biology as well.